Start seated, something nice and comfy. Ah, and we'll just, I've been really liking that anchoring in. So feeling your body, oh, shoot, I just like Darth Vader again. Feeling your body just settle, relax. And from that settling, that relaxation, connecting energetically to the physical connection your body is making with the floor mat earth. And just softening into a, a repetitive breath cycle that feels supportive for you. We'll give ourselves about 50 more seconds here. Last 15 seconds of feeling into the seat. As you're ready, eyes can open if they're closed. Let's turn our let's turn both of our palms down. Left hand's gonna kind of pressurize into that medial edge of the left thigh, and right hand's gonna come on the hip. And I want you to just think about neutrality across the shoulder girdle here. So our primary focus is shoulder girdle staying neutral, and we're gonna pressurize the left hand and rotate until we get a little of this anterior abdominal band activation. And then we'll relax back to neutral. Again, just allowing the shoulder girdle to stay neutral. Right hand comes to that medial side, left hand to the hip. And we take that same pressure from the right hand to help guide the shoulders into the rotation, but we don't lose or dip, and we don't allow the right shoulder here to roll forward, which it has a little bit of a tendency to want to do. And then we'll roll back to neutral. And let's walk forward to fold. And as you settle into that forward fold, opportunity to interact with the torso's posterior chain. All right, I've taken the lower half of the posterior chain out of the equation. And now we can just see where we're feeling limitations in the back. Or maybe not limitations, but sensations. And we're gonna give ourselves 40 more seconds here. So a pretty good duration of forward fold. Start to see if you can use the exhale portion of your breath as that relaxation. It's generally a little bit easier to relax than the exhale. And if gravity can help change the angle of the sacrum and the lumbar connection, so that sacral connection, the lower we can get the torso, the more depth there is to that angle, and the more gravity can interplay with that soft tissue that unionizes the upper and lower half of the body. And then as you're right, when you're ready, let's walk back up to seat. From seat, take both hands to heart center, offset the fingers so we can interlace, and push the palms away from you if that is within the practice. If not, palms can be towards you. But we have that finger interlace so that we have some activity around the shoulder capsule. And then inhale and reach the arms up and overhead. As this happens, there's that little desire to kind of arch in the low back, keep the core engaged with the diaphragm kind of retracting so that we have neutrality there. And then relax the hands back to heart center. So the finger interlace is lost, and we can feel a little of that softness around the supportive tissue of the shoulder. And then as you get there, as you land, can the tops of the shoulders soften down away from the ears? And can you engage the abdominals and the glutes so that the torso actually lifts up? So you get a little bit taller in your seat. And then relax the shoulders once again. Almost like the cervical spine is getting longer, but it's not. It's staying the same, and everything else is compressing or softening down. Compressing is definitely the wrong word there. And then fingers offset and interlace, and we'll press and extend away. Inhale and reach up. Keep that abdominal or diaphragm retraction, and then exhale to heart center. And we'll go through that same little settling process. Glutes stay active, core stays active, shoulders soften down. It's almost like the cervical spine is elongating, but I think it's an optical illusion or a physical illusion. And then we'll relax on this transition to hands and knees tabletop. If you want to use your blanket underneath your knees here, feel free. No need, but just in case. And take the knees back maybe like an inch, inch and a half. So there's just a little bit of an offset. What that can manifest in two ways, right? We can offset and you can get that big natural arch of the spine. That's not what we're looking for. We're going to go that same diaphragm retraction that we had in seat. So we get the spine nice and neutral. You can see when I'm deactivated in the core, big belly drop. When we bring in that activation, the hips change or the sacrum changes, and we get that stability. And then we're going to add some sway. So the primary kind of focus is to take the belly drop out. And then the sway is relatively easy, right? We don't have to think a lot about how we sway. But as you're moving left to right, because we have this abdominal activation, really pay attention to that upper abdominal band, kind of on the lateral edge of the diaphragm, and how it is forced to get involved in this lateral movement, and see if you can get into enough engagement / range of motion with the hips that you can feel the individual sides, left, right, of the abdominals activating and deactivating as you sway. And then we'll come back to neutral and walk the knees back to their more traditional alignment. And now we should have a little bit more awareness around the sacrum, around the low back and the sacrum unionization. Come into our neutral space once again, curl your toes and roll back towards down dog. And we should have a pretty surprising amount of room here. I haven't touched the posterior chain in the lower half of the body. We did that upper half of the body, but we have played with the hips and we have created some low back space. So really get back into that depth. And then at the top of, or the back edge, back range of your down dog, let's sway the hips once again. And it's almost like we can feel the reverse musculature of the abdominals here. So now we're working with the left-right side of the spinal column, just below the rib cage once again, but on the back side of the body. See if we can counteract what we did on the front side of the body with this back side of the body movement. And then we'll lower ourselves to hands and knees and just drift back into child's pose. And we land and we settle and we breathe here. And so in 1814. Jean-Francois Millet is born in the north of France. In a little kind of hamlet, Greville-Auge. And Jean-Francois Millet grows up to become an incredible artist. When you're right, when you're ready, let's slide the fingertips back in front of us if they're not already there. Bring some strength into that hand connection. Pull yourself to hands and knees tabletop with an inhale. And let's take the torso and bring it so hips, we have that femoral stack, and we're just gonna go just slightly forward, and then bring that neutrality back into the spine and give yourself the sway here. And then curl your toes underneath you and keep that sway going. And then we're gonna roll back really slowly through down dog. This takes a lot of upper body strength. So if you need to reposition the weight, feel free. But if we can keep the weight just a little bit forward and allow for a little more awareness through this movement, and then we're just gonna rock back and eventually make our way into down dog. And as we're doing that, we can feel almost the entirety of the torso's posterior chain musculature getting involved. And that's why we take that little load. It just helps to bring the weight requirement a little higher into the body. And as you roll back into this space, using this sway, can you really develop the depth of your down dog? Yes, beautiful shapes. Nice, Stephanie. And then let's walk ourselves forward. We'll find fold. From fold, let your head go. Let your body relax. Feel the depth that's available to you. Feel the space and the room that you've created, and then drift your awareness to your sacrum. And as you do, let's roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae. And we'll find our way to mountain. Hands come together, heart center, eyes closed. If it's within your practice, obviously, if it doesn't feel comfortable, just open the eyes. But if it's within the practice to keep the eyes closed, remove or release your hands to your hips so that the pinkies are pointed down or at the lower end, and the thumbs are wrapped behind you. So 4 fingers in front of you, index fingers on the top, pinkies on the bottom, better way to describe that. And the palms are facing towards the back of your mat. And then we're just going to find the balance in the feet and then squeeze the glutes in the same way we squeeze the glutes in our first seat, where we got that little core elevation. So enough engagement in the glutes, enough engagement, torso elevation is a better way to describe that. Enough engagement in the glutes, enough engagement in the core that we get active in the torso and the trunk. And then we're gonna start to sway the hips side to side. So feet are rooted, and we're just playing with the edge of the lateral chain, really, right? So we're playing with the edge of our possibility in our lateral movement with engagement, with stability in the trunk space. And then we'll come back to neutral. Heel toe your feet as close together as possible. Take your hands to your shoulders. So if we don't have the capacity to get the hands on the shoulders, just go palms up. But if you can get the hands on the shoulders and then elevate the shoulders, elevate the elbows, to shoulder height, so that we have a really stable base here. Squeeze the glutes once again, and we're gonna go back into that lateral sway. It's a much harder movement here laterally with the hips. The restrictiveness of the anterior and posterior chain is put on pretty much full blast when we take the hands into this position, at least for most of us. And then we'll relax back to neutral. Just let the palms fall by your side. Let your eyes close once again. And let the upper body deactivate. Keep the glutes maybe 10 to 15% engaged. And then see if you can let the quads and the hamstrings relax so that there's a little bit of a softness, a sponginess at the knees. And keep that as you sweep the arms up and overhead. And then like you're melting into fold. Instead of rolling or feeling into fold, think about just melting into that fold space and allow the musculature around the thoracic joint to release. That's what we're looking for here, is that mid-back musculature, generally the stickiest bit of musculature for most of us, to get the opportunity to receive the fold. The knee bend is almost always essential and required to make that possible. Great awareness. Heck yes. Plant your hands. Let's walk back to down dog. Oh, you guys are the best. And then let's come down to hands and knees. Flip the tops of the feet and sink to child's. And as you land here, pay attention to how the musculature in the torso, right, that back side of the body, upper half of the body, is really both the potential for some fatigue and the desire to really release and settle into this shape. And then use your exhale breath to continue to get the torso to sink. So the torso is either sinking and compressing further onto the thighs, or maybe the thighs are wide of the torso and the torso is actually sinking down towards the mat or floor. And as that happens, we increase that angle once again, and I want you to feel the musculature on the back. So we were mid-back kind of specific as we came down here. Can you continue to release that mid-back, which is sternum now towards the floor? And as that happens, can the awareness around the hip compression, right, which we kind of have to overcome because we haven't touched that, but can that, assuming we have the hip space, and if we don't, it's my fault, blame me. But if we do, can we get the energy to shift down the back so that we're getting closer and closer to the sacrum with each exhale? And if you're feeling this at the hips, first off, blame me, be mad at me. Second off, what an opportunity to expand the hips. Now we're just using that mid-back space to expand the hips. And then when you're ready, let's use the fingertips to grip into the mat. We'll inhale, pull ourselves forward to hands and knees, tabletop, and we're gonna sweep our legs around so that we end up in a seat, staff pose, legs extended, the spine tall, shoulder blades active or core active enough that we can get that upper body to kind of transcend that little bit of fatigue that we may have manifesting right in the middle of the back, and then keep that mid-back musculature active as you come forward. So it's not this big round, but we're really active as we come forward. Once you get to the full length of your fold, then you can allow yourself to melt in. But I don't want the thoracic joint musculature to guide this fold. I really want to transcend that into the length. And then we'll breathe. And this will be a little bit of a hold. We're going to do 120 seconds here. And just finding the opportunity for the back to receive the release of our breath. And so Jean-Francois Millet goes on to become this incredibly important artist. He's influential in both the expression and expansion of naturalism and realism. And realism is the thing that he really helped to revolutionize. He has this incredible talent to capture still life and pasture and humans within nature doing the things that humans do. And the detail of this realism movement is mind-blowing for people. Keep in mind, this is kind of at the earliest stages of photography, where most people would have never even seen a photo, nor would they have access. They certainly wouldn't have access. When you're ready. Let's walk ourselves back up to C. And we'll take our blanket. And we're going to go from shelf fold, so blanket or towel, right? Shelf fold to towel length, and from towel length to a nice roll. With the exposed edge on the bottom of the roll so that the top of the roll has a nice solid and uniform as a blanket or towel can be base for us. And we are headed straight, so maybe a little more detail. That's going to come behind us, and it's going to run the length of the spinal column. So we have the tail end bumping up against us, and then we're just headed down on this roll so that the head is supported and the medial line is met with the stability of the blanket, and the lateral edge can just roll away from this medial line stability. The feet can be bent, yeah. The knees can be bent, so the feet can be on the mat, the bottoms of the feet can be together, or the feet can be out wide and the knees can be together. Legs can obviously also be extended. I just feel like we've done so much on the back already that it might be nice to have that knee bend to offer a little bit more softness. So the intention, the hope here is that we have a little bit more openness along the posterior musculature, and that the support down the medial line on the spinal column is really allowing for the lateral edges to waterfall away. And so obviously we've all been in this shape hundreds of times, maybe thousands of times, but I'm hoping for some new sensation here because of the way we treated the posterior chain of the torso before getting into this shape. Try to balance the relief of the shoulder blades, and that's kind of a good indicator that the support is perfectly down that medial line, at least on the upper half, right? Obviously, with the blanket, there's the ability for that to S and curve. But if you can get those shoulder blades balanced in between, or the blanket balanced in between the shoulder blades, that sets up for a really nice opportunity for this lateral expansion. And we're going to be here for just another 60 seconds. So 39 years after Jean-Francois Millet is born, Vincent Wilhelm is born. He's born in Holland. And he also grows up wanting to be an artist. And he is dramatically influenced by Millet's work. And he spends hours and hours in the countryside of Holland and France trying to create captures, right? Artistic captures of the things he's seen, the humans he's seeing, the work he's seen done, the still life he's around, with this realistic touch. Last 15 seconds here. And as you're ready, knees come back to a neutral position where they can point towards the ceiling. We'll roll to one direction or the other so we can get outside of the influence of this prop. And then we will just pull that prop off from the mat, and we're going to transition to our wall. So choppiness in a recharge class. I apologize for that, but choppiness is sometimes worth it. So let's see if we can make that happen. So we're headed to the wall. We'll take the approach where we get the hips as close to the wall as possible. And then from that close to the wall as possible, just swing up, end up with the feet up this wall space. And now we have recreated staff, right? We've just flipped the horizontal and vertical portions of the shape. And because we've switched the horizontal and vertical portions, we have different responsibilities. We no longer have the responsibility of core activation to keep the torso vertical. Now we have the responsibility of maybe a little bit of glute activation, of anchoring the sacrum down into the corner, and also allowing for the knees to be in a position where we can receive the low back work. So if you are in this shape and the sensation, experience, restriction is all in the hamstrings or all in the high calf, we need to bend the knees until we feel the low back land, because that's what we're looking for here, is that low back landing. And then we're just going to breathe. And so Vincent Bielhelm does all this work, hours, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of hours, attempting to recreate this realistic painting approach of Jean-Francois Millet. And time after time after time after time after time, everyone who he shows his work to laughs at him, tells him to stop wasting his time, tells him to find something where he can use this passion and this energy, which he clearly has, to create something maybe more meaningful. And Vincent Wilhelm has very few supporters of his desire to be an artist. His family is remarkably against it. He struggles to feed himself. Often he ends up having to walk hundreds and hundreds of miles, sometimes barefoot in the snow, because he just doesn't have the financial capability to support himself. And his art is not very good. And selling art is never an easy thing. Selling bad art is exceptionally hard. We have another 60 seconds here. It's a pretty good amount of time to be in this inverted shape. Remember that if the feet are starting to go numb, it's just because the blood flow or the body is designed for blood flow to work up from the feet and not down, up. Let's see, up from the feet, not up into the feet. There we go. So you can bend the knees, obviously, you can change that responsibility. That's the point of that. Last 5 seconds or so here. And then we're going to bend the knees so that the thighs come down towards the torso. And really work to, as the thighs come in towards the torso, to tuck that tailbone down. So there's a little abdominal squeeze to make that possible. And then pull the shoulder, so hands on the shins or hamstrings, and then pull the shoulder blades back until you get the upper half of the body to be as active as you have the lower half of the body with the core squeeze pushing the tailbone down. And then note the angle, which is neutral, of the cervical spine and the torso interengagement or interaction. And then we're going to lift the head only so much as you can keep the interchange between the cervical spine and the thoracic spine neutral. So if the chin starts to tuck, that means we've broken the shape. As long as we can keep that interplay neutral, we're going to hold that. You'll notice, or you may end up noticing, that there's a ton of anterior cervical spine musculature here. The front of the throat musculature that can almost feel like it's suffocating you. It's working so hard to make this possible. And we just don't use this particular piece of the throat musculature very often. So it also can be pretty fatiguey pretty quickly. And then we'll relax. Oh, head lands here. And as the head lands, the entirety of the torso should pretty much settle. Legs are going to extend back up the wall, and then they're going to go wide for a little wide leg inversion. This helps to address the medial line, inner edge of the leg musculature. And then the arms can be anywhere that feels comfortable. Cactus T, on the sternum, down by your sides, whatever feels appropriate, even behind your head works. And this particular shape won't be quite as long as our traditional legs up the wall shape. But one day, Vincent is in his little cottage and he's trying to paint this view he has out his window. And he's just looking at it, and he's looking at this stack of artwork he's created. And it's all kind of just blah. And he knows in his heart it's just blah. And he's getting in and he's trying to create these little tiny details with the brushstrokes to create this realistic expression of what he's seeing. And it's just junk. And he puts his brush down and he sits down and he's distraught because the entirety of his life's energy are going into these paintings and they're junk. Just then he gets a knock on the door. His friend Annabelle comes in and she immediately senses something is wrong. And she asks the question, she says, what's the problem here? What's the challenge? And Vincent Wilhelm kind of unloads on her everything he's been experiencing. When you're right, when you're ready, we are going to bring the knees back down to the thighs, just roll one direction or the other, whatever side feels most ideal, and then press ourselves up into seat. And we're going to reverse against the wall so that the spine comes against the wall, the legs will extend out, and we will create our staff once again. From staff, we're going to take the elbows up to shoulder heights. If you've done this with me, you know this is a wonderful form of torture. We're not going to be here long, just enough to create some fatigue. For most of us, the fatigue sets in about 15 seconds. But all we're looking to do here is fatigue that upper back musculature. So I should note, you have to press the elbows, press the back of the hand, and press the shoulder blades against the wall to really get the musculature to activate. And that's what we're looking to do. So we'll give ourselves just 15 more seconds here. Elbows, hands, shoulder blades pressing against the wall. And when you're ready, release the arms, take yourself into the forward fold. This is a little transition fold, so just find the length, find the depth. And then we will walk the knees or feet back towards the sternum. So you can end up in a place where we can ideally interlace the finger mound and the toe mound. And if you can't interlace the finger mound and the toe mound, just grab the ankles. But if we can interlace the finger mound and the toe mound, that's most ideal. Yeah, they both create what we want. So let me just say that. And then from there, we're gonna pull the knees out wide of the shoulders and start to pull the toe mounds or the ankles back so that we get this anterior posterior musculature around the shoulders, and then start to bring your torso forward. As the torso comes forward, you can allow the elbows to rest on the shins, knees still stay wide of the shoulders, and help leverage into some space. And what we're looking for here is access to low back musculature, mid back musculature. It's pretty unlikely that this manifests in the high back and the thoracic spine, but maybe right at that thoracic joint. More likely, more common is probably going to be for this to be a lumbar experience. And then tuck your tailbone back into that corner. That's why we're up against the wall. So squeeze the core so you can really push that tailbone into the corner as you come forward into this fold. Keep retracting the feet with that hand-arm energy. And last 15 seconds here. And when you're right, walk up to seat. Nice work. And let's come back to a place where we can lay on the mat, spine down. So spine down portion of this is all that is necessitated or desired. Knees can be bent, bottoms of the feet can be together, legs can be extended. This is about receiving the work we've done. So we finally made it to the part where we can appreciate what has happened. So Vincent Wilhelm, he unloads on Anna about all of the effort and time and energy he's wasted. And he has this recreation of this series of Jean-Francois Millet's artwork on the wall. And he has these copies he's been making of this artwork below each piece. And he shows them to Anna, and he can sense that as she's looking at these, she's just disappointed in what he's creating. And she's not outwardly expressing that, right? She's trying to be as kind and as receiving to the work he's done as is possible. But the reality is what he's creating is just not close to what Millet has created. It's just a poor copy, and it's poor copy after poor copy after poor copy after poor copy. And sometimes he has 10 or 15 different attempts to recreate a Millet painting. And they're all object failures. Last 20 seconds here just to settle into your appreciation. And when you're ready, when you're right, knees return back to neutral if they're not there. We're going to start to explore the lateral sway. So this is rotation of the lumbar spine through knee sway, but it doesn't have to be full rotation. I started with the word explore because I really want you to feel into the amount of movement that works for you, that benefits you here. And then eventually, we're going to allow the knees to fall to one direction or the other. Now, remember, you have that prop, and you can utilize that prop to soften the amount of rotation that you have by either taking that under the lateral edge of the down thigh or in between the thighs themselves. Just think about what would be the most beneficial for the spine here. How do we support the spine so that it can receive the really an awful lot of work that we've done, considering this is a recharge class? And so Anna looks at Vincent Wilhelm and she says, you know, maybe this just isn't the right thing for you. I can see the passion and the effort. And obviously, I look at this stack of paintings, it nearly touches the ceiling. It's not for lack of trying. And something about that conversation with Anna changes Vincent. Last 50 seconds here on this first side. 50 seconds. 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 50 And when you're ready, knees return to neutral. And then we will exhale over to that second side. Remember, you have that blanket available to support the landing on side 2 as well. And so Vincent changes. He stops trying to recreate Millet's work. And he starts painting the way he feels called to paint. And he creates paintings for the first time he's proud of. And he puts together this collection of work that he's created. And there's this upcoming auction where artists from all over France are going to come together and auction off their work. And he brings this collection of his work through his eyes to this auction. Last 60 seconds on this second side. And they put up his first piece. And as the curtain pulls back, the audience sees Vincent's work for the first time, and they start laughing. And they start jeering the expression that he's put out. When you're right, when you're ready, knees return back to neutral. Bottoms of the feet come together and the knees fall out wide. Last opportunity for this medial line soothing. Somebody bids on a painting. And they bid a half franc. And as they bid, they shout out explicitly, "This is not for the painting, this is for the frame." When you feel right, when you feel ready, knees return back to neutral. And from neutral, allow your awareness to drift within you. Ask yourself if there's anything you might want or need before Shavasana. If there is, this is the perfect opportunity to offer that. And if there's not, if you're ready to be still, to settle in, just settle in. Be at ease here. Be completely settled here. throughout the entirety of the auction, Vincent Wilhelm's works are jeered and made fun of. Some of them go completely unsold. But Vincent leaves the auction that day without the usual gloom around people viewing his artwork. Not because it was received well, it wasn't. But because he had created something that was a true expression of himself. Start to bring some movement to your fingers and your toes. And today, we visit the works of Vincent Wilhelm van Gogh in the largest and most prestigious museums in the world. Moving into your wrists, your ankles, your elbows and your knees, and your shoulders and your hips, neck, head, jaw. Eyes. Eventually we'll bring enough movement through the body that we can transition from the shapes we are in back into a seat. From this seated space, spine gets tall, breath gets fluid, eyes close. And we'll inhale our hands together at center. And over the course of the next 7 days, can you remind yourself that within each of us is a specific genius. And it can never be unleashed if we're always trying to be someone else. And see how that impacts your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Sunday, guys. Love the heck out of you. Appreciate the heck out of you being here. Have a beautiful week. No class tomorrow night for Memorial Day, but we'll do this again next week. We'll get our recharge on. Love the heck out of you. Mwah.